meeting? Or just
Today is
restart
September
I'll
7th,
call you back,
2022, and this is a meeting of the Program Implementation Subcommittee of the Critical Area Commission for the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays. We do not have a quorum at this moment. We are missing one member who is stuck in traffic, so we're going to shake things up for our September meeting and go in reverse order. And we'll start with the town of Chesapeake City, and first their critical area map designation update. Ms. DeWeese, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. Good morning, again, my name is Alex DeWeese. I'll be presenting the town of Chesapeake City's critical area map update. So Chesapeake City is located in Cecil County. It's highlighted on this map of Maryland in red, so in the northeastern portion of the state. And then more specifically, it's located kind of centrally within the county, along both sides of the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal, or the C&D Canal. As per 2008 updates to critical area law, as you know, we're required to remap the 1,000-foot boundary for each of our jurisdictions based on recent technologies. Specifically, as per COMAR 270111, we remap the boundary every 12 years. This is because our original maps were hand-drawn and based off of very old photos, so naturally there were some inaccuracies in those older maps. And additionally, this addresses how our coasts have naturally changed over time due to erosion, sea level rise, tidal wetland systems, a variety of factors. So, ordinance number 2022-002 was adopted by the Chesapeake City Mayor and Town Council on July 11th. Staff from the county, the commission, DNR, MDE, and the Eastern Shore Regional GIS Cooperative collaborated on this update. And the maps that I'm about to show you were presented at public meetings in the towns, and there were opportunities for public comments. So this should look somewhat familiar, but I will try to orient you a little bit. The town boundary on this map is this kind of white dotted line. So it's kind of irregularly shaped. Again, the C&D Canal runs through the town. As usual, LDA is represented by red, and LDA is represented by yellow, and the current critical area boundary is represented by a red line, and the proposed critical area boundary is represented by this green line. So you'll notice that there is no green parcels here representing RCA, and that's because the town doesn't currently have any. However, the surrounding critical area within the county is primarily RCA. So with this map update, the town gained 6.8 acres of critical area and lost 0.7 acres of critical area for a net gain of 6.1 acres. Additionally, 246.5 acres remain the same from the map update. So I just wanted to point out that this kind of status map of where we are in the critical area map update process for all of our jurisdictions can be found on our website as well as on Maryland IMAP. And so just to give you a little idea, again, Cecil County and the towns within it are what we're talking about right now. So you can see that we've delivered a summary draft map as indicated by this orange color. So this is available to you anytime if you're wondering what's the status of a particular jurisdiction and what does it look like. So based on all of that, our recommendation is commission concurrence with the chairman's determination to review the map update as a refinement, as well as the chairman's approval of the map amendment as proposed. Any questions?
Are there any questions from the commission?
Yeah, I've just got one that kind of, when we do these map changes, well, let me just preface this a little bit. In St. Mary's County, we did, there was a new installation of new critical areas, and it was expanded, which looks like what the green line's doing, the red line, okay? And what I'm getting at is that people came along and said, well, wait a minute, now that's where I was going to put my retirement home. That was gone. So we ended up with this term, which is very convoluted, called grandfather. And so what happened most recently is we had a cannabis facility, grow house, approved in the critical area down there. And one of the arguments of one of the commissioners in St. Mary's County, and the applicant was, we're grandfathered in with Critical Areas Commission, and we can do this type of use. I won't go down that road, but what I want to ask you is this. If something expands prior to, or they had a use prior to this, do they get to build their retirement home there now that we've changed the rules?
So I think it depends on a few factors. What the critical area designation is proposed to be within the area that
You mean RCA or IDA? Or?
Yeah, exactly. And what that would allow. And I think as well how far into the process they are. Like, have they already received approval?
Haven't started.
For that. Well, if they haven't started, I don't know that we would consider.
Lisa, do you mind speaking to how we do the designations on the expanded critical area?
Sure. The way that we do it is we work with each county, and so we'll show them this map, for instance, and we'll say, okay, county or town, here is an area that we have to put on a new designation because it now will be in the critical area. So we have to choose between intensely developed area, limited development area, or resource conservation area. And traditionally, back when we first did the maps in the early 80s, if the area looked like it was undeveloped, we would say, well, that needs an RCA, or slap an RCA designation down. However, we learned that that wasn't probably the most smartest way to do things, because what happened back then is there could have been a pending subdivision application or building permit for a house. And the more appropriate designation might have been an LDA or even an IDA. So we work with the counties to make sure that we're putting the most appropriate designation on properties if they know that they're either under consideration for development or they have an active permit. They just haven't put a shovel in the ground yet. So that is how we do the mapping, to make sure that it is the most appropriate critical area designation for those new properties where the expansion is happening.
Okay, does the property owner lose their benefit or lose their right
No,
with this new?
they do not lose their right.
Some jurisdictions implement explicit grandfathering clauses when they approve their new maps, but it's not across the board.
Right, that is correct.
So it's something we got to keep an eye out for if we're going to have to deal with this in St. Mary's, because we are dealing.
Well, you've already dealt with your map update in St. Mary's,
Yeah, I know.
and you've already put in some language, I believe, and Bill is here.
I know you.
Yes, so there is language for folks who were in the process. Maybe they hadn't got their building permit and the county council adopted the maps and subsequently the commission, but they have until a certain date in the future to get that final approval.
Okay, all right. Sorry to take.
So you're covered in St. Mary's. You're one of the counties that put in special language.
Good.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sure.
Are there any additional questions? Is there anyone here from the county that wanted to speak, or from the town, I should say?
I don't think they've
No?
this.
Okay, okay. With that then, Mr. Ferguson, is there a motion that the commission concur with the chairman's determination that the Town of Chesapeake City's map update may be reviewed as a refinement to the Town of Chesapeake City's critical area program?
Commissioner Greer, if you don't quite have.
Oh, I apologize, I started to. That's why we're going in reverse order, it's like I was just rolling through.
Interrupt you, but we have to wait on that.
Mr. Ferguson, at our 1 PM meeting, I will look for that motion. How's that?
All right.
Ms. DeWeese, would you like to go then on to the Town of Chesapeake City's comprehensive review of the critical area program?
Thank you. Again, Alex DeWeese. Next up, we're going to review the Town of Chesapeake City's comprehensive review. Again, Chesapeake City is located in Cecil County along the CMB Canal. Oh, before I move on, I wanted to point out that there are 2 attachments to your staff report. The first is called 5A. It includes changes recommended by commission staff, which we'll cover in more detail later in the presentation. The second is called 5B, and it's the adopted ordinance without our revisions. So as you know, as per Natural Resources Article 8-1809G, critical area programs are required to be reviewed and updated every 6 years. The Town of Chesapeake City's program was originally adopted in August of 1988, and their last comprehensive review was in October of 2012. So it's time for them to do this. And as you would note from the last presentation, the map updates are happening simultaneously. So for this specific comprehensive update, on July 11th of this year, the Town Council voted to adopt and the mayor signed ordinance 2022-001, which amends Article 8 of the critical area section of the town's comprehensive development ordinance. So these updates that they adopted were based on the municipal model ordinance provided by our staff, as well as updates to state law. And so this included a variety of standard updates around project notification, water dependent facility standards, RCA density and use standards, growth allocation, alternative adjacency standard, after the fact variance procedures, and buffer establishment. And this was just to bring all of those up to current language. So I wanted to pull this map up again real quick, just to remind you, the town is primarily IDA and LDA. Well, not primarily, it's exclusively IDA and LDA, no RCA, with some of the waterfront designated as modified buffer area. And the reason I wanted to point out this map and the fact that there is no RCA in town, although most of the critical area in the county bordering it is RCA, is because it's relevant to some of the changes that we've proposed that they incorporate into the ordinance. So the proposed changes by our staff include non-substantive and minor edits that are just necessary to bring it further into conformance. So some examples of that include replacement of the word municipality in brackets with specifically the town of Chesapeake City. This is just kind of leftover language from the model ordinance that they forgot to fill in. Deleting instructive footnotes that are part of the model, same reason. And minor text changes for consistency with the law and regulations. In discussion with the town about these changes, our understanding is that these revisions can be included when the ordinance is formally incorporated into the zoning code. So I'm going to leave this slide up here and would like to turn to attachment 1 so we can kind of walk through the changes a little bit, discuss any questions you might have. So if you're looking at attachment 1, following along, staff's recommended changes are listed below with the brackets indicating the removal of language and bold indicating the addition of language. So I'm just going to walk through kind of each section and give you a general idea of what we're proposing here. So in the notification of project approval section, we are requesting that the town replace the word municipality with town of Chesapeake City throughout this section. Again, like I mentioned, it was just kind of leftover language in the model ordinance that they forgot to exchange with their own name. Additionally, there's some duplicate language that should be deleted because it's redundant. Moving further down this page, in general requirements, we're requesting that the phrase bracketed should be removed because it's a footnote that's no longer applicable, because the town decided not to include the language in the supplemental use section, which is the directive here. Under limited development areas, there's a phrase that we would like them to add back in because it seems that it was accidentally deleted, and without that phrase, it's not a full sentence. So flipping over to the next side, under resource conservation areas, again, the town needs to exchange the word municipality with Chesapeake City. Additionally, they need to do a little bit of reformatting and renumbering to achieve the correct meaning. In the supplemental use standards for accessory dwelling units, there's a citation that needs to be replaced just with an appropriate citation in the natural resources article rather than COMAR. Also in supplemental use standards, construction on piers, the town of Chesapeake City was originally one of our earlier adopters of this language, allowing non-water dependent structures on piers, that language has since been updated. So just to bring this section into consistency with our current standards and language, we've made some text revisions there. So those text revisions kind of are a little bit lengthy. I don't think we need to go into detail. Of course, if you have any questions, please let me know. But the second page both sides of it are related to just bringing the construction on piers language up to current language. So now looking at the third page, and I'm sorry, I'm just now realizing these are not numbered, which would have been helpful. But it's the third actual page, or I guess if they were numbered, this would be page 5. And it starts with C, the setbacks of the wind energy system, if you're having a hard time finding this place. Is everyone with me? Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay, so moving down this page, under growth allocation process, we're requesting that the town replace in brackets, again, local approving authority with their town council and mayor, as well as remove a footnote that's no longer applicable. So again, just similar to some other requests that we've made of them. Under growth allocation standards for designation, bracketed text should be removed because it's a footnote that's no longer applicable. Under growth allocation standards for designation, a reference to LDA needs to be removed because it doesn't meet adjacency standards. Additionally, bracketed text can be removed because it's not applicable since the town contains no RCA, which is why I brought up that map again earlier. With these deletions, this section needs to be renumbered, so we've included that as well. And then flipping this page over, we have our last one, buffer establishment and vegetation. The table inserted into this section has a space created to insert local program adoption date, which hasn't been done yet. So again, just a minor one where the town kind of forgot to insert information that they needed to exchange. So, does anyone have questions about those specific revisions?
Ms. Deweese, all those were reviewed with the town, and they're okay with all of those changes?
We didn't have like a detailed conversation and walk through every single one, but they have a copy of what our revisions are and didn't have concerns, questions, or comments.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure of that. Are there any other questions from the commission members? Okay, thank you very much. And next up on the agenda, we have
Sorry. Can I go forward one more for a second? I forgot to say what our recommendation was. So real quick, our recommendation is everyone's concurrence with the chairman's determination to review the comp review as a refinement because it was completed in accordance with the state law and COMAR. Additionally, we recommend chairman approval of the comp review with the following condition: within 120 days and prior to formally incorporating the ordinance into the zoning code, the town of Chesapeake City shall incorporate the revisions from attachment 1 recommended changes into the ordinance. And that's it. Sorry.
She really wanted to get to that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Deweese. With that, our next item on the agenda is St. Mary's County Supplemental Use Standards for Residential Pools Text Amendments. Annie Sakarik.
Hi everybody, good morning. I am Annie Sakarik and I will be presenting the St. Mary's County Supplemental Use Standard Text Amendment. And I would like to point out that we do have a couple representatives from the county here today, Bill Hunt and Mr. John Hauser in the back there. So they will be able to help answer any questions that may come up. So thank you gentlemen for taking the time to come up here today. So just for really quick reference, St. Mary's County is shown here on this map in red. So the proposed text amendment will remove an existing provision from a specific supplemental use standard in the county code. Supplemental use standard number 122 affects residential swimming pools across the county. Among other items, the existing standards prohibit a residential property owner in the critical area from applying for a variance to disturb the buffer for the purpose of installing a swimming pool and associated decks. Removal of this provision will provide a property owner in the critical area the opportunity to apply to the County Board of Appeals for a buffer variance. The proposed text change does not affect the requirement for a variance to meet all 7 critical area variance standards. The County Board of Appeals is required to apply the variance standard as provided in state law. Typically, a residential pool fails to meet the standard for unwarranted hardship because it is considered an amenity as opposed to being integral to the reasonable use of a residential property. However, state law and regulations do not prohibit an application for any specific type of a variance to a local critical area program. We note that the variance standards contained in the St. Mary's County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance have not been updated to reflect current state law. The last comprehensive update to the critical area program in the county code was in 2002. Until a comprehensive review of the county's critical area program has been approved, any critical area variance request presented to the County Board of Appeals must be evaluated based on the variance standards in the state law and regulations. So, based on that, Commission staff recommends that the Commission concur with the Chairman's determination that this text amendment be processed as a refinement to the St. Mary's County Critical Area Program. Further, because there is no similar type of prohibition in state law and regulations, staff recommends the Chairman approve the text amendment as proposed. So thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Chair Root.
So with that, are there any questions?
I guess I just missed, are you saying that pools are not allowed, but it says that they can't apply for a variance and you're letting them apply for a variance? Is that what?
Correct. There's currently a provision within the supplemental use standard for residential pools that prevents an applicant from even applying for a variance.
In the
or
St. Mary's
buffer to its
County,
own pool.
right? In St. Mary's County.
In St. Mary's County.
Is that the way the other communities have it in their ordinance? How does it compare to other ones?
I'm not familiar with any other jurisdictions.
Is
with a
it
similar
part of the
provision.
boilerplate code from critical area?
No, there's no restriction in state law to somebody being able to apply for a variance or appeal.
So it just happened to be, you're just adding that they can apply, not that they still have to meet all the hardship
They are
requirements.
removing the provision that prohibits that standard.
Okay.
So what are those provisions? I think one of the questions before, I hate to jump ahead of everyone, I'll take all your questions. What, to meet a variance under state law, you said it would have to be analyzed in accordance with state law. What are those factors, I think? Because I'm anticipating that's going to be a question.
Going to defer to our Assistant Attorney General.
So there are 7 variance standards that every application needs to meet. I'm not going to read these verbatim, I'm just going to give you the highlights, but the first one is called unwarranted hardship, which means that without the variance, without the variance, there would be an unwarranted hardship to the applicant.
Not reasonable significant use.
Right.
Would that include handicap stuff?
There's a whole separate process for reasonable accommodation, so, and then the second one is a literal interpretation would deprive the applicant of a use that somebody else has under the program. There would be, the third one is special privilege, that special privilege would be denied in accordance with the provisions of the local critical area program. The fourth one is that the request is not based on actions by the applicant. Fifth one has to do with whether it arises from any conforming or non-conforming condition on the neighbor's property. Sixth one has to do with whether it adversely affects water quality or adversely impacts fish, wildlife, or plant habitat. And then the last one is whether it would be in harmony with the general intent and spirit of the critical area law. So this is more strict than a standard zoning variance, but it's not as strict as trying to prove that there's been a taking of the property. So it kind of is in the middle, but it's definitely a higher standard than a regular typical zoning standard.
So like if someone built something before critical area and the neighbor wants to have the same thing, is that in there?
Well, no, if something is grandfathered, then that is, again, a separate issue. It's like dealt with separately. Is that what you mean?
No, it's like your neighbor has a pool and you want to have a pool, but they've got their pool built before critical area applied.
Mhm.
So now they can't have one, but their neighbor has one. Is that in there? It seemed like it was. It sounded like it was.
The evaluation is on the basis of under the current program. It's not on the basis of, well, my neighbor got one before the law came into place, therefore I get one. So it's under the current program is the evaluation of what you have to look at. Would somebody get a pool under the current program in the buffer?
Mr. Ferguson will go right down the line. How's that?
What would the process look like now that you can apply for a variance for a swimming pool? would you go first to the county and then to an administrative law judge? Or would you go straight to an administrative law judge in your appeal?
Well, the resident would apply to the county, and I think
You go to the Board of Appeals.
or John could speak to the local process.
Annie, would you like us to come up, join you, maybe help answer some of the questions?
That's
Just direct me where you would like us to,
Oh,
I don't see a witness stand, that's
You're-
right.
yeah. Making it really bad over here.
Folks, by way of introductions, my name is John Hauser. I'm an assistant county attorney with the St. Mary's County Attorney's Office. Joining me here today is Bill Hunt, the director of our Land Use and Growth Management, to talk you through, Mr. Ferguson, the process for what a variance would look like. It would begin with submitting the application for the permit with Land Use and Growth Management. That would go for initial review before the Department of Land Use and Growth Management. Once the determination is made, the criteria that this is a project that requires a variance, next stop is going to be our local Board of Appeals, a 5-member board, and they would be the ones that the applicant would present their request for a variance. They'd be advised by their independent counsel, and it's that Board of Appeals that would make the determination whether or not the variance should be granted. To answer that.
And then it would stop from there at the Board of Appeals?
For the most part, for the sake of the variance in compliance with that part of it. Now, there still might be other requirements of the code and other reviews that have to go through that can be found elsewhere that wouldn't be part of the, necessarily what we got going here. So there might still be some other reviews for land use and growth management. There's also the chance that the aggrieved party could appeal the decision of the Board of Appeals one way or the other and seek judicial review. For the purpose of seeking the variance, in most cases, that stops at the Board of Appeals with their verdict, be it what it may. Doesn't necessarily have to stop there every single time, though. I'd also like to speak into the earlier concern about the variance standards that have to be met. There's also, this might be particular to St. Mary's County. I'm not sure if other jurisdictions interpret their code away. St. Mary's County, Chapter 24 of our Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance deals with grants for variances, and we've got 2 separate sets of standards. We have a 7-factor set of standards that apply for any request for a variance, be it a request that emanates from the critical area program or not. And then we have the additional 6 factors that are required statewide that have to be assessed for any appeal from the critical area program as well. For St. Mary's County, the way we interpret it, the critical area variance has to fit both of those 2 sets of standards. It's got to satisfy both. So there's an additional set. Now, they don't differ too materially from what's in the critical area program. There is some stuff there that's a little unique that I don't think would be too dispositive one way or the other in a case of a swimming pool. That's the application, but just want to make folks aware those exist as well and are out there. But in short of it, the proposal, again, it's not obviating any of these variances. It's not saying any of these standards don't apply. It's just giving folks the right to make the request and ask for a variance and say, we think we've got a shot at satisfying these standards. We want to go in front of the Board of Appeals, speak our piece, try and get the variance to build a swimming pool. That's, at the end of the day, what the zoning text amendment is hoping to accomplish.
Commissioner Taylor?
If I'm understanding this correctly, the standards for the state and the standards for your county are the same,
We're more restrictive.
except for more restrictive standards that you already have in place.
Right. So this one particular, our prohibition, our outright current blanket prohibition on that you cannot request a variance for the swimming pools at all, that is a more restrictive element of our code that exceeds the minimum standards of the critical area program. I kind of, maybe I unnecessarily muddied up the waters a little bit talking about our separate set of standards. Those by and large get at the same things as the critical area program. There are some things that they would have to satisfy correctly. One of them, this might have been an earlier point, is that the variance cannot be based exclusively upon reasons of convenience, profit, or caprice. That is a St. Mary's County standard that would have to be satisfied as well, that would not be done away with or go away with passage of this text amendment. There's also the, I get the exact language here, that the conditions creating the difficulty are not applicable generally to other properties within the same zoning classification, which I read that out loud. Actually, I think is found in the critical area standards already largely, but we've got that in the counties.
I'm a little curious why the county would want to take this on when the state is already providing this level of review through their own standards.
It doesn't, because currently St. Mary's County Code says you can't apply for a variance. They're changing it to allow the application for a variance, and then
it would be considered under the factors they've discussed. Currently in St. Mary's County, you can't even make an application for a variance versus some other jurisdictions have provided you the ability to apply for that variance. This would allow someone in St. Mary's County to apply for a variance.
But couldn't they do that through this body?
They could not because St. Mary's County, the way the code's written, prohibits the application.
And also, can we add one more point to clarify? This body does not make decisions
Exactly.
on local critical area variance applications. Staff sees the variance applications, we provide review and comment, and that is our role. The chairman has appeal authority over decisions, but we do not make those decisions. Those are all made at the local level by the boards of appeals. Does that help?
Thank you.
Commissioner Hewitt?
Tell me, Annie, how many of these have been approved by the Critical Area Commission in the state of Maryland?
Well, in terms of variance decisions that we've received,
How many have you recommended approval for?
We don't recommend approval.
Well, you recommend denial.
We do. We either provide,
If you can deny, why can't you approve?
because we recommend denial when we believe an application does not meet the standards. It is not the practice of the commission staff to make recommendations for approval. They will point out how things may or may not meet the standards, but they will not make a recommendation for approval.
Okay, my concern with this, and I've made it known before, is this. To go before the Board of Appeals in St. Mary's County, you're going to run into the process where they're going to say the Critical Area Commission denies this approval. I spent 5 years on the Board of Appeals a while back, and one time we went over and above the Critical Areas Commission recommendation, but it was very, very minor. And Critical Area Commission did not come back and say, wait a minute, guys. We said, no, we're going to sue you. So my question to Ms. Veneri or whoever the appropriate person is, when do you draw the line and say, you guys made a decision on the Board of Appeals? Because we know 5 people can make up their own mind. My concern is your inputs are very important to them. And typically when Critical Areas says no, they say no. But I've seen one time in the last 22 years when we said yes and you didn't sue us. When will you sue us? Because that's something the director has said to this board 4 months ago. These variances will lead to a litigation by the Critical Areas Commission. So tell me, when do you draw the line as when you're going to sue? If they approve, look, what's going to happen when we allow this, we're going to have several come in right away. And the people who are applying are waterfront owners who have very nice homes. They're intelligent, sophisticated people with the pockets to get the engineer, get the surveyor, pay the fee, wait to 8 months, 6 months till it gets there, only to be told Critical Area says no. So what do we tell those people? Is that a service to them?
I mean, I think, Commissioner Hewitt, every application is viewed independently. We look at the proposal, we look at the standards for a variance application, we provide feedback and guidance on, and oftentimes when we look at a pool, it rarely ever meets the standards. It's an amenity.
So
It's
why
not-
even allow them to ask?
In fairness to Commissioner Hewitt, in fairness to the Critical Area Commission, that request originated from the county.
No, because we're more restrictive than the state, and we don't want to be more restrictive than the state. And what happened was, people who own properties that have nice homes have come to us and say, you're more restrictive than the state. Why are you guys like that? So we'll change. But my point to these applicants is going to be, don't spend the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, go through the 6-8 month process, only to have the Critical Area Commission say no. So my first point is, have you ever allowed one to happen? And second one is, when will you sue them? if the Board of Appeals approves one?
It will depend on the factors of the case.
I mean, it's gonna depend on we look at every single decision, on variance decisions when we get them from boards of appeals and evaluate whether or not to bring a lawsuit. I mean, that's as best as I can tell you. We look at every single one individually. It depends on exactly what's in the decision, it depends on how it's written.
So the point is, it's still gonna be unknown.
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor?
I'm still a little confused about this conversation because if the standards are the same, with the exception of a few that are more stringent, how can it get passed? How can it be approved by St. Mary's County Board of Appeals?
It won't. Is it fair to have someone put up the fee?
But you said,
Engineering?
no, then they would be sued, assuming.
No,
I'm
no,
assuming
no,
from
that's the
that.
Critical Area Commission.
But-
They wouldn't be sued unless this is approved.
So what Commissioner Hewitt is saying is, okay, state law allows the application for a variance. St. Mary's County doesn't. We've amended our ordinance to make it consistent with state law to allow the variance. But Critical Area Commission, if it gets approved by the Board of Appeals and you don't agree with the standards, are you then going to challenge that decision and appeal it to the circuit court? And what the Critical Area Commission staff are saying is, we don't know, because we'll look at each decision individually. But in all candor, by and large, typically a pool does not meet the standards for a variance. And so Commissioner Hewitt's point, I think, is really, because I don't see St. Mary's County asking us to withdraw this so they can change their ordinance, but I think his point is, why does state law allow something that, like, are we giving people false hope where they're gonna spend a lot of money and not then be able to meet the requirements? So are we sending them, I hope I'm not, are we sending them on a fool's errand?
Well, Mr. Taylor, what I would say to you is if you're allowed to do a variance request, I think it's reasonable to think you'll get approved. Now, if there's no chance of approval, why even allow the request? It's like asking someone, hey, can I speed?
Well, that gets back to my original question is, why would the county want this?
Well, because we're more restrictive than the state, and we want, so, look, I'm gonna make the motion that we take this first step. But what we need to tell applicants is, you're gonna run into a no vote, or no from the Attorney General for the Critical Areas Commission.
Well,
And that could influence.
One question, and I know in my county, I'll just speak for my county, when you apply, I've seen the letters and I've seen it, there is on bold, and I don't know if this is something the county might want to consider, there is a bold warning to applicants that these standards are very difficult to meet. That's a county decision, but I would just throw that out there to the county.
But I think, Ms. Greer, Chairman Greer, if we're gonna say that, we have to give some kind of, what's the term? Example of how it was approved. So people, look, it's one thing to set the bar very high, but it's another thing to show this is someone who hurdled it. So that's the part that I have the most, angst about, is that no one's ever hurdled the bar. And again, it gets to be not a service to our constituency, look, I'm a commissioner, so I'm not like, I got people who call me and say, you guys are too restrictive. I'm saying, look, I'm trying to help you, keep you from spending all this money, taking all this time, showing up on a Thursday night when you would like to be home with your family, only to get.
I mean, I think the only response I can provide, which is not going to be a helpful response, but I think it's a matter, personally, I think the variance process is not, it's not a perfect fit, right? It's just not a good fit.
It's not black and white.
There are 7 factors, right, there are 7 factors that you have to balance and evaluate, and it is not a black and white line that says yes or no every time. I think a lot of what I have tried to help with over the past couple of years with boards of appeals is an education process and just trying to help boards understand what these factors and what these criteria actually mean in real life and how to apply them to real applications. And otherwise, I agree with you, it's not, it doesn't serve your citizens well, but at the same time, the commission is coming at this from making sure that every program is effectively and uniformly implemented. And so when the commission looks at applications, they take that statewide view to ensure that it's consistent as much as possible across the board. So,
And the last thing I'll say is this. All of us, all of the state, Emily, you guys, you're paid by the taxpayer. So when we're doing something that's not really in the benefit of the citizenry, are we really, are we really doing our job?
and that's not my role,
I know.
that's not my role, right? That's
You're still paid by it.
Can,
Well,
if I can
with-
add one last
I'm sorry.
point, just to I think the thing to also consider, Commissioner Hewitt, in looking back to the law is the General Assembly has purposely strengthened the standards and made them more difficult to obtain over the years when it comes to critical area variances. And if you go back to the findings of the law, it stresses throughout the importance of the buffer. And those are all components that get weighed in providing our comments and feedback to boards of appeals. It's also part of the education that Emily provides to boards of appeals when she is walking them through what do these standards mean. So, our role as the commission is also ensuring that the law as it's written is being implemented consistently.
I get it. So Madam Chair, can I make a motion that we recommend approval of the Commission's concurrence that the Chairman's determination that this text amendment be processed as a refinement to St. Mary's County Critical Area Program?
I am so proud of you, Commissioner Hewitt, because you have those motions down pat. Is there a second to Commissioner Hewitt's motion? We do.
Second.
With the second, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes. With that, we can move on to the proposed regulation updates, growth allocation provisions, and shore erosion control chapter.
Good morning. We're changing gears a little bit and we're going to talk about regulations. Last month I was here and I presented these same regulations to you as information because we were waiting on stakeholder feedback. We wanted to give folks plenty of time to get in touch with me in case there was anything that they wanted to see changed or amended before we actually move forward today with a vote to publish these in the Maryland Register. Having said that, I checked this morning, and as of this morning, and they actually had until yesterday at 5 p.m., there were no additional comments from any stakeholders, groups, or local governments that we've reached out to in the last couple of months. So with that, we're moving forward today, and we're going to ask the full commission in the afternoon to take action on these regulations so that we can publish them in the Maryland Register to move forward with the promulgation process. Now, I'm just going to quickly go through a review because I think all of you, except maybe Alicia wasn't here last month. What we are proposing in this regulation proposal is two things. One is to amend a provision in the growth allocation regulations, but the primary purpose behind this proposal is to update the shore erosion control chapter. Now, you might remember I've told you this over and over again when we've been going through kind of methodically each chapter in COMAR. We've been modernizing the drafting style, updating it because the law has changed, other laws might have changed. In regard to shore erosion control, we've had updates to the Maryland Department of the Environment's regulations and statute. So we want to make sure we're consistent with that. And then we delete the outdated provisions. So it's pretty much a cleanup, if you will, of the shore erosion control chapter. So in COMAR Title 27, Subtitle 01, Regulation 1, these are our definitions, and in here we're just making a few minor adjustments. We're updating the agricultural best management practice definition and inserting a new terminology, which is shoreline stabilization measure. And you may recall from last month, that's a new term, and the reason it is because that is the terminology used in Maryland Department of the Environment's regulations and statutes, so we're making ourselves consistent. We're also, in the definition section, as you can see on the far left-hand side of the screen, repealing our terminology, which is 1986 terminology, shore erosion protection works. And moving along to the applicability section, this is a new section that we're putting in to make it clear what types of structures we're talking about with regard to shore erosion control, which is different than water-dependent structures that we deal with in our other water-dependent facilities chapter. We're redrafting the policies and the criteria. So again, that goes back to just updating and getting rid of outdated provisions that have happened since these regulations were first promulgated, which was in the late 80s. So moving on to Chapter 9, which is our Habitat Protection Area chapter, specifically the buffer regulation 01. We're repealing again that shore erosion control terminology and inserting shoreline stabilization measure. We're doing the same thing in 01-2, the mitigation and planting standards. And then finally, in the 01-3 buffer management plan section, we're repealing that a shore erosion control permit is required under COMAR Title 26, which is the Maryland Department of the Environment's regulations, and inserting that local approval of a shoreline stabilization measure as authorized by the Board of Public Works or the Department of the Environment. Because sometimes these structures, depending on how long they are or their size, go through the Department of Public Works versus the Maryland Department of the Environment. In our Renewable Energy Generating System chapter, which is Chapter 14, a fairly new chapter that you all voted on in the last year, in the planting plan requirements, again, we're just messing with the terminology, trying to make sure that in any chapter we're making the terms the same so folks aren't confused. And then moving into Subtitle 02, again, we're going into the definition section and inserting shoreline stabilization measure. In Chapter 5 of Subtitle 02, which is state agency actions on state-owned lands, we're going into specifically Regulation 05, which talks about shoreline stabilization measures. Again, we're just going in and rewording all of the definitions that need to be changed and updating them. Same thing in the planting plan requirements in Regulation 15-3. Now I'm going to switch back, if you will, to Subtitle 01, and I'm going into Chapter 2, specifically Regulation 6, which talks about growth allocations with regard to how local governments process growth allocations. And in the growth allocation submittal requirements, we're clarifying that if they're removing or clearing in the buffer that we're talking about, the first 100 feet and then subsequently any expanded buffers. And we're repealing the shore erosion control language and inserting shoreline stabilization measure. But in Regulation 06-3, this is something that we're clarifying because we've come across it a couple of times in recent years when working with small towns or municipalities that are wanting to do a growth allocation. And in the law, it talks about you have so many acres of growth allocation allocated to your town or your county, and 50% of that can be used from an RCA to one of the other categories, but you can't use more than 50% of that. And in towns, we're specifying or clarifying that the growth allocation allotment requirement for towns, that they can utilize more than half of their growth allocation allotment to convert an RCA. And this is consistent with state growth policies because the idea is that in towns, this is where we want the growth to be concentrated. And we had a situation in Queenstown a couple of years ago. They were doing a growth allocation. It was RCA, and it would include using more than half of their allocation. So the requirement is still specific to counties. However, the towns, we believe the intent of the law was to allow the towns to go above their half allotment, if you will.
What about state-owned properties in counties?
The state does not have growth allocation allotted to it,
Okay,
so it doesn't apply.
so it doesn't.
Yeah, that's a good question. So our recommendation is to vote to approve the regulations as presented in the staff report and attachment. And then I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Greer at this point.
Are there any other questions from the commission members? No? Okay. With that, Commissioner Hare Cornwell, is there a motion to, this is going to be a little bit of a long one, to approve regulations affecting the following Code of Maryland regulations? Comar 27.01.01 General Provisions, Comar 27.01.02 Development in the Critical Area, Comar 27.01.04 Shore Erosion Protection Works, Comar 27.01.09 Habitat Protection Areas in the Critical Area, Comar 27.01.14 Renewable Energy Generating Systems, Comar 27.02.01 General Provisions, Comar 27.02.05 State Agency Actions Resulting in Development on State-Owned Lands. 2, to approve regulations that amend Regulation .01 under Comar 27.01.01 General Provisions, amend Regulation .06-1 and .06-3 under Comar 27.01.02 Development in the Critical Area, adopt Regulation .01-1 and amend Regulations .02 and .03 under Comar 27.01.04 Shore Erosion Protection Works, amend Regulations .01, .01-2 and .01-3 under Comar 27.01.09 Habitat Protection Areas in the Critical Area, amend Regulation .06 under Comar 27.01.14 Renewable Energy Generating Systems, amend Regulation .01 under Comar 27.02.01 General Provisions, and amend Regulations .05 and .15-3 under Comar 27.02.05 State Agency Actions on State-Owned Lands. And 3, to authorize Commission staff to forward this draft to the Administrative, Executive, and Legislative Review Committee, and subsequently to publish these regulations as proposed regulations in the Maryland Register. Is there a motion to that effect?
As stated, I make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. And all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And we now have a quorum, and I have spoken to our commission member from Wicomico County, and she has read all of the staff reports related to the town of Chesapeake City and is comfortable if we would like to bring that back for a motion and vote by the program subcommittee. So with that, Commissioner Ferguson, is there a motion, if we go to Chesapeake City Critical Area Map Designation Update on the agenda, is there a motion to concur with the chairman's determination that the town of Chesapeake City's map update may be reviewed as a refinement to the town of Chesapeake City Critical Area Program? Further, that the proposed changes are consistent with the purposes, policies, and goals of the critical area law and regulations, and that the chairman approve the non-substantive map update as proposed.
As stated, I support and offer the decision here, the action for the committee.
Is there a second? Commissioner Hewitt seconds the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. We then moving on to the item listed on the agenda, Chesapeake City Comprehensive Review of the Critical Area Program. Commissioner Grant, is there a motion that the commission concur with the chairman's determination that the comprehensive review of the Town of Chesapeake City Critical Area Program may be processed as a refinement to the Town of Chesapeake City's Critical Area Program? Further, that the proposed changes are consistent with the purposes, policies, and goals of the critical area law and regulations, and as such recommend the chairman approve the Town of Chesapeake City's comprehensive review with the edits set forth in the revised attachment 1 to the staff report dated September 7th, 2022, and so long as such changes are incorporated into the Town of Chesapeake City's critical area program within 120 days of the chairman's approval. Is there a second? Second? All those in favor? Second by Commissioner Taylor. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. If we could now then slip to the approval of the May 2022 minutes for the program subcommittee. And has everyone had a chance to review those minutes?
Yes.
Commissioner Mulkey, do I have a motion to approve? Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. And is there a motion, and I'll recuse myself from this vote, I was not in attendance at the July meeting. Is there a motion to approve the July 2022 program subcommittee minutes?
So moved.
Commissioner Hewitt's made a motion to approve. Is there a second? Commissioner Blazer? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those, any opposed? Hearing none? There we go. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And that concludes our business.
Moving us right along,
I'd like
Madam
to,
Chair. Good job.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Grant for joining us.
Giving us a quarter.